If you're in the market for a new or pre-owned vehicle, try Pop Chevrolet. Pop Chevrolet will get you the best price guaranteed. Visit popchevy.com. That's P-O-P-S Chevy.com. This episode is brought to you by Paintsville Tourism. Paintsville is located in eastern Kentucky in the heart of the US 23 Country Music Highway. Visit paintsvilletourism.com. That's paintsvilletourism.com. Come see why Paintsville is eastern Kentucky's city of note. This episode is brought to you by Wild Bill's Fireworks. At Wild Bill's, they will help you start and maintain a successful fireworks business. Whether you're starting a retail store, a seasonal tent, or a part-time venture, Wild Bill's is your one-stop wholesale fireworks supplier. Their team can help you pick inventory. They offer business training, ongoing support to make sure you stay profitable no matter the size of your business. Call or text for more information. Just ask for Bill at 606-367-5569. That's 606-367-5569. Or visit wildbillsfireworks.com and make sure you ask about their financing plan. Welcome back to the show. We hope you're enjoying our series. In today's episode, we sit down with Chuck Bedwell. Chuck worked for everyone in Nashville. He was a music publisher in town and a legend on Music Row. Let's get to it. This is Behind the Shed.
A beautiful part, today, the way they make records today is a lot of programming and a lot less playing.
Yeah.
They still do sessions, but not like we did all the time. And, part of that whole thing, making records and demos back then, which we made a lot of for the publishing company, were just, records that we didn't spend as much time and money on, pretty much, was you'd have this, conglomeration of all these really talented people, as you guys know, you remember, and
right,
and it was like a party going on, with incredible ideas, and somebody would always do something great. It wasn't just fun.
And there was always something good in a demo somewhere.
Absolutely, but again, it was a group of people getting together and doing something together, and and today I think it's less of that. It's kind of a sad commentary to me. Now they still do it, but there's a whole lot more programming going on, and a whole lot less
they're more
playing going
perfect
on
now, but they don't feel as good.
Absolutely. Right. How many mistakes turned into a key lick at some point?
Yeah.
What'd you do there?
Well,
that was a mistake. I'm sorry. No, let's keep it. Everybody do that, know?
There was also a point there, too, when it went from analog to digital, and where you used to be able to get, like, a case of beer and, go do a demo and then wake up the next, that night, boy, we hit it. And then the next day you'd be like, boy, that really sounds like shit.
That happened.
Yeah.
That happened too. Yeah. Where you convince yourself you got something great. But, can you think of any time?
Sometimes I know one or two times that I went back to the rough mix and made the record from not the mix or the finished thing, but
the rough.
Right.
What we did in the studio that day.
Sure.
You went back to that.
You've talked about that. And so people that might be watching this that don't understand
I know of two things we did that with. Yeah.
Yeah. But so people that don't know how that process was, obviously we recorded everything on a different track, and then when we were done, you mixed it all together. And the engineers and producers would spend hours in there riding things up and down. And so the point is, there were many times you went back and used a rough mix, just kind of get it done quick to listen to, instead of the final mix, which is, can you think of anything you did that on that we might know?
Yeah. Around the Clock Lovin', KT.
Wow, really?
And
I didn't know that one.
Yeah. A Matter of Wine.
Oh, wow. I don't know that
That's
one.
It was written by Carl. Was it Carl Sanders? Who was this?
I don't know.
No, not. It was the first song he wrote when he moved to Nashville.
Huh.
Mark Sanders.
Mark Sanders.
D. Okay,
wow.
yeah.
Mark
Sanders.
And who recorded it?
Mel.
Okay, wow.
Did he?
One of the first songs I cut on Mel, and the day we cut it was the best cut,
Wow, yeah.
And we went back to that rough mix to finish it.
Wow.
You know, I was going to
Sometimes they feel differently, you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know that sounds silly,
No, they do.
but they do. You
Well,
know?
that old saying, I still like the demo better. You know, I mean, a lot of people, when you do, if they were to go back and hear that original demo, you know, but, you know, we were talking about Glenn the other day, and we were just talking about stuff, how, you know, doing mixes and all that kind of stuff, and you miss stuff. But you remember on A Lady Like You, in the bridge of that, it was supposed to say, and it's a mystery that someone like me could, you know, to be blessed with a lady like you, but it says wristery.
Yeah.
You remember in the record, if you go back and listen to it now, all of a sudden he goes,
fixed it
yeah,
though.
right. But that's what I'm saying. But the original,
Glenn,
I remember,
Glenn said it's the wristery.
yeah, because it's instead of
You
mystery.
don't like wristery? Is that?
Well, I liked it more after we worked on it.
When you were a kid, all right, because obviously you didn't have the, you know, internet, phones, all that stuff. You had either a record or the radio, right? That's really all you had.
Radio.
Yeah, radio. Yeah. What were your, like, who inspired you back then to like get like, that made you all of a sudden think, I like music.
Biggest
right?
inspiration was plowing a mule.
Just to get the hell out.
This ain't really what I want to do.
Well, I mean, I can't imagine you were like, you know.
Well, we had the Grand Ole Opry, you know. We had a big battery radio. Had a dry cell battery in it. And a little thing you might not know about that.
I do, yeah.
When they start going bad, when the battery starts failing, you can put it in an oven and heat it up, and it'll work another 2 or 3 hours. You know?
Wow.
So
And
anyway,
if the Opry wasn't over, throw it in the oven and
sometimes we got Friday and Saturday night. You know,
Hey, what kind of radio was it? You remember?
True Tone,
I knew you'd know that.
True Tone.
True Tone. I've never heard of that one.
Western Auto.
How about that?
Silver Tone was Sears
Yep,
Roebuck.
I know
True
that.
Tone was Western Auto, and so were the guitars.
Yep.
They were True Tone also.
Did you have like a favorite artist when you were a kid?
Yeah. Had Roy Acuff. And
He was a rock star, wasn't he, back then?
yeah,
Man.
he was popular. Well, he had some great songs too.
Mm-hmm.
He was a funny guy. I remember coming to Nashville with my dad, and he'd hang out down there at the record store on Lower Broad, and you know he always had
Yeah,
a
he
yo-yo.
was a big star.
and he had a
was big
yo-yo, and I
star.
remember him chasing me around as a kid with that
And
yo-yo.
so was Big Bashful Oswald.
I loved him.
Oh,
Brother Oswald with the big shoes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Man, what a nice man he was.
And
He's-
Lefty Frizzell.
Oh, Lefty, my fave.
He was really good. And Don Gibson was really good.
That's true.
And who else on the Opry? Bill Carlisle.
Bill Carlisle.
Jumping Bill Carlisle.
That's right.
Need a little help? No help.
No
wanted.
help wanted. I started playing when I remember very well, I was 4 years old because my uncle was a preacher. I had 5 uncles who was preachers, who were preachers. And my daddy was a preacher. And my oldest brother was a preacher.
Wow.
And so I've heard some preaching. And I sat on the Model A running board and played a mandolin that my daddy made.
Are you kidding?
Wow.
And it actually played?
Yeah,
He must have been pretty good.
he was.
Wow.
He was. He made it.
What year was that?
Well, I was 4. I was born in 31, 35,
Wow.
Wow.
What happened to the mandolin? Who knows?
probably. I don't know.
Do you have is that the one you were in the picture we're holding when you were a kid?
No,
Oh,
that's a
okay.
real mandolin.
I thought it was. I couldn't remember.
That's
Yeah.
a Gibson.
Okay, I couldn't remember. Yeah.
That's the one my sister had to sign at the bank for me. I didn't have a job. Never had a job. I couldn't get no credit.
That's what you said in the last episode. You never had a job. You
Well,
did
you
say
know,
that.
I can't say that I did. I loved my job
Yep.
so much, I couldn't wait to get to work in the
Oh, yeah.
morning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's
But she signed
that's
for the
how
mandolin.
good it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she signed for the mandolin. So go
Yeah,
ahead.
she sure did.
That's crazy.
She worked at Hubbard Pants Company, made pants.
Wow.
How much was the mandolin?
I want to say close to 200, maybe 185 bucks or something like that.
Wow. Even back then.
We
wow.
went to Chattanooga and bought it at a
Wow.
music store.
Yeah.
But she had to co-sign. Or
Yeah.
that's a great story.
So now I've seen the picture of you and your sisters, but you all played around as a group, right? You and your
Yeah, we
sisters?
played together. Yeah, I had 8 sisters.
Yeah. And you
And
were
we
the
all
youngest.
played. We all played
Yeah.
in church
Wow.
together.
Wow.
How many total kids in your family?
Do what?
How many total kids? How many brothers and sisters?
12.
12 brothers and
Yeah,
sisters.
8 girls and 4 boys.
Wow.
Yeah.
But now only the 3 sisters and you played, right? When that picture I
No,
saw.
all my sisters played.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, and,
Wow.
and sang.
And so did
and
you.
my brothers. My oldest brother played a tenor banjo,
Wow.
4-string.
Wow.
And David played a guitar, my next brother.
Yeah.
And my youngest brother, JD, played.
Yeah.
We all played something
Yeah.
and went to church. You went to church before you played. My battery is dead. It's gone.
Put it in the oven.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's
Not
good,
the
Russ.
microwave.
That was good,
now.
Russ.
Not the
Yeah.
microwave.
If you're in the market for a new or pre-owned vehicle, try Pop Chevrolet. Pop Chevrolet will get you the best price guarantee. Visit popchevy.com. That's P-O-P-S Chevy.com. This episode is brought to you by Paintsville Tourism. Paintsville is located in eastern Kentucky in the heart of the US 23 Country Music Highway. Visit paintsvilletourism.com. That's paintsvilletourism.com. Come see why Paintsville is eastern Kentucky's city of note. This episode is brought to you by Wild Bill's Fireworks. At Wild Bill's, they will help you start and maintain a successful fireworks business. Whether you're starting a retail store, a seasonal tent, or a part-time venture, Wild Bill's is your one-stop wholesale fireworks supplier. Their team can help you pick inventory. They offer business training, ongoing support to make sure you stay profitable no matter the size of your business. Call or text for more information. Just ask for Bill at 606-367-5569. That's 606-367-5569. Or visit wildbillsfireworks.com and make sure you ask about their financing plan.
So when the picture I saw with you and your sisters, and I don't know what variation you all played as a group, but did you all went out and played like dances and stuff too, not besides
Not
church
dances,
or just
no.
church?
I played dances, but my sisters, they wouldn't play dances.
Okay, got you. So you all just played in church together.
Yeah.
Wow.
What church was it? Like Pentecostal? Was it Baptist?
Baptist.
Baptist. So you didn't dance. You didn't.
Most of it was in a church called Fellowship Baptist Church.
Okay.
My daddy preached there all his life, as long as he was alive.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. It was a great church.
Wow.
Over the time, the era that he preached there, well, he died while he was still preaching there.
Wow.
And he baptized between 400 and 500 people.
Wow.
He had baptized 15. They had a 2-week service in August of every summer. They called it the big meeting, they called it.
Yeah.
Got to go to the big meeting. So, okay. So we'd get in a wagon and we'd go to the big meeting. And
Was that there in Bremen?
Buchanan,
Buchanan.
yeah. And we lived in the country on the Tallapoosa River.
Wow.
Lived about maybe a quarter of a mile from the river, and there was an old Indian where Indians used to live, and my buddy and I, Odell Gentry, we used to go. We'd spend hours at this old Indian playing and pick up arrowheads and pottery, and there were two gigantic mounds, and there was just all kind of stuff underground in these.
Yep.
And my mother was a big Jimmy Davis fan, and every evening she played Supper Time. Remember that song?
Yep.
Come home. And Odell and I would be half mile from the house at this old Indian campground or whatever it was with these two big mounds, and we could hear my mother playing the Supper Time. And then she'd call us, "You boys come home, it's supper time." And that's how she got us to the house every day.
Wow.
That was her dinner bell.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Odell and I, we went to school together and played and ran around together for a long time.
Wow. So you went. When did you go in the service? Were you 18?
I went in 1950, so I would have been 19.
Okay. And so were you playing music while you were in the service too?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you got in bands and stuff, obviously, or
I had a guitar.
yeah.
I've got some pictures of me up on a bunk and
Yeah.
all bunch
I've
of
seen
guys
it.
around.
I've seen them. Yeah.
Right? I think I've seen that
And
too.
Yeah.
we'd play and they'd sing and
Where was you stationed at? Where were you stationed at?
Germany, Frankfurt, Germany. Loved it. I loved Germany. Had some great times there. I've been back twice since I was in the Army there.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a great country.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Yeah. You had to learn Fraulein over there, I guess.
Yeah,
Sing that.
I sang Fraulein.
I
Yeah.
believe it. Yeah. So when you got out of the service, did you go straight into radio?
No, I started a band.
That makes sense.
And up north of where I'm from, in a town called Rome, where we went to the film festival, the first TV in that part of the country was in Rome. So I had a band. Pee Wee was in my band with the New Beats,
Yep.
Yeah.
and my cousin Olin Little, and another guy named Bobby Little, who was no relation, and a guy named Hugh Pointer, and two sisters. And I had the TV station signed off at midnight and came on at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, was on till midnight, signed off. And of course, this was in the beginning of TV, you know, and it was black and white. And then I'd go by an hour or 30 minutes, whatever I needed at the time of radio time, and then I would go resell it to sponsors, and I'd make a little money to keep my band paid.
That's awesome.
Way to go. Yeah.
And
Show business.
yeah,
Yeah, man.
like OK Rubber Welders. Back then, that was a big tire recapping company, and they paid about half my TV time. And another guy, I think I told you this, he was from Rome. We Sell the World, Todd Auction Company.
Oh, wow.
And that was his logo.
Yeah.
We Sell the World. And then he hired the band. They literally sold cafes, motels, hotels, farms,
Yeah.
everywhere. And then everywhere he'd have a big sale where they were going to make a lot of money, he'd hire the band and we'd go play
Oh, wow.
while the people,
Yeah, man.
he'd put up these gigantic tents and we'd play under these tents till everything was sold.
Wow. So they paid you to come play the gigs, plus they paid you for the advertising to do the show.
That's right.
Now, when you did the show, did you do the ads yourself?
I did.
You talk and say, "Hey,
I did.
Wow, that's pretty cool."
I sure did. Well, I sold the time. I'd go call them, and so I did that for a few years, and then the guys. Well, right before the station was built in Bremen, I had a friend that I'd played in a band with named Lee Williams, and he had gone to Montgomery, Alabama, and wound up in a little town about a half an hour east of there called Tallahassee, Alabama. And so I still had a band, but I was struggling, I was playing, but I wasn't making any money, but it was like that. So he called me one time and said, hey, we've got Saturday and Sunday open if you don't mind working on the weekends. And I thought, well, hell, I've worked on the weekends all my life. It's no big deal to do that. So I said, well, I might come try it. And he said, well, you can start on Saturday, and if the guy likes you, you can work Saturday and Sunday. And if he really likes you, you can probably get a regular job. They got some other stations, and he had 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 4 stations. And I went, long story short, after about a month, I could write commercials then and do commercials and all that and produce them and put music behind them. I stole a lot of Glenn Miller music and put behind commercials, and stuff. So he saw I could do stuff, and he hired me full time, and sent me to first to Macon, Mississippi. Boy, what a place! You ever been to Macon, Mississippi? Anybody?
Did we miss anything?
Well, it was a country town. All I had was a bunch of pecan trees. Well, I loved R&B music a lot too, and Jim Cotton played great R&B music.
Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah. When I was doing jingles, and we were working at the same place, Jim, like we'd do. We did all kind of creative things to sell stuff, like I would go, or one of the other salesmen would go to a radio station, and we'd go inside and meet the owner and the manager and the commercial manager and all that, and say, is there a car dealer or a furniture store or something in town that spends all of his money in the newspaper, but you'd really like to have him on the radio, kind of stuff, just like that. Oh, hell yeah, I got 2 or 3 of them, and they always had. So I'd take the guy's information and go write a jingle or a commercial or both, and you wrote a 60-second version and a 30 and a 20 and a 10. You wrote 4 versions. So you had a pop version, and you had a big band version, and you had a R&B version, and then a country version. And sometimes sometimes the country might be a 60, sometimes it might be a 20 or a 30.
Depending on the market.
Or it might be a 10 sometimes. And so Cotton did all the R&B versions.
Oh, man.
I knew that. Yeah. I heard some of those.
Janie Fricke did a lot of the country versions. She and Judy Rodman. She worked there then too when I worked there, and another girl, Wendy Suits,
Wow.
that used to be with the first Nashville first edition,
Right.
with the Herschel's group.
Jim Cotton, man, what a guy he was.
You know, I tell you what's interesting about that is that, and I'm going to throw this over to you in a second, Chuck, because you kind of started in radio yourself because of your dad. But the fact that you had to go out and create a musical product that actually sold something.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that in the record business, we were trying to create something that somebody would like so we could sell something, but you really had a hard sell you had to do. And I think that influenced your success later on to me a lot coming from that. You know, it's interesting. It's just because I didn't come from that, you know, and the fact that you had done that and started radio has always intrigued me, that, you know, interested me that
Well, wherever I worked, I was always a program director.
yeah, exactly.
I knew enough about what I was doing to get that job.
Yeah. So, and I don't know many of us that got in the publishing or record business or anything that came from that. You know, Chuck always talks about his dad being in radio and how he was exposed to all that stuff. And I always, because I know I came from wanting to be in bands and all that stuff, but you did that as well.
But your dad owned clubs and all that kind of stuff. He knew about. Didn't he own?
No. My dad was in the insurance business.
What did I think he owned?
No, I don't know. It wasn't my dad. He was in the insurance business. He never understood most of this stuff in the beginning.
That's what he put on his job application.
Yeah.
He never owned a nightclub.
Nope. No, that was my father-in-law.
Yeah.
Don owned the big clubs out in California. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That was
Your
my father-in-law. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't catch you there for a second.
Yeah.
But anyway, the whole radio thing. And so Chuck does the same thing, you know, and you can probably talk about that too, coming from that thing to come into music. Because Chuck mentioned on the last podcast, you know, that Brian was the musician and that helped him. But he had come out of radio kind of because his dad was in radio. And that's interesting to me to come from that angle, you know.
I think it's, you know, it's that culture you're raised in. I mean, I can remember our thing on the weekends. There was a place called Frontier City, all right, and it was like this country and western theme park, but not a lot of money invested in it. It had a couple of big circular slides, and it had like the downtown was all like a western. And man, and I remember I'd have my cowboy boots on and my hat, which I got made fun of in Michigan because I wore a cowboy hat, and my mom spoke funny because she's from Alabama, you know. But you know, back then you had like 5-6 acts that would travel together. So it'd be like George and Tammy and Merle and Willie, you know, back when he was the redheaded stranger, you know, but they'd travel on one bus together, you know. They'd come in and it was just a different time because they'd come in and Harold, you know this better than me, but yet my dad was the DJ. He'd go up there, okay, put your hands together for blah, blah, blah. And it was such a cool thing as a kid. It really I never really didn't have music as a big part of our life because it was, you know, my dad's main income. Besides, he had a construction company and stuff, but he did an hour show, you know, daily, you know, Chuck Bedwell Good Time Hour, and play new music, and guys would come in, you know, they're trying to, you know, I said Roger Miller used to make a stop there. He wouldn't go to WWJD. He'd said, I'm going to go to WJCO and see Chuck Bedwell. Well, that made my dad, he was the shit because Roger would come and see him.
And they would.
And
because he'd play his record.
And he spun his record.
Whereas the other station might not could do that.
Right. And it was amazing because those guys back then, you know, those programmers, you know, they had a trunk full of albums and they were on the road. And you mentioned the other day that those guys had the real job of getting the record played. And I don't care what year it was. But
RCA had a guy that was the best I've ever seen. He lived in Atlanta. His name was Sam Wallace. And if you research RCA, you'll see a lot of Sam Wallace.
Well, I have to check that out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
His name's legendary.
Yeah, but Different World, that was the only game in town. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but radio. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, you know, that was the other part I was going to tell you that was so great about it, Russ. It really was the beginning kind of radio. Not like not like last week, but
Right.
radio was so unique when it started in that there were only so many frequencies allocated, and all the original frequencies, probably there was maybe a dozen of them, and 9 or 10 of them were all in the south and southeast, and the northeast. They were all except 3 east of the Mississippi River. In the beginning, there was WSM, WLS Chicago, WWL in New Orleans, and it just sold, by the way. That awful guy, George Soros, bought WWL in New Orleans.
Wow.
So it'll be a propaganda station. It's gone to hell. But WSB in Atlanta, WSM in Nashville.
Yep. LS we used to listen to where I'm from, Louisville. Yeah, we get it on a good night. Yeah.
And WLS in Chicago.
Yeah.
And Louisville at one time was WHAS.
Yep.
Because they broadcast the Renville Valley Barn Dance.
They did.
And then they had WCKY in Cincinnati, and in Texas, which is the other side of the Mississippi, they had in Dallas they had W.
It was a W, it wasn't a K?
No, it was a W.
Okay.
It was one of the first ones.
Okay.
And there were 2 WL in New Orleans.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I forgot.
I think there was 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah.
And then after that, every station east of the Mississippi started with a K. And the stations I own in Louisiana were all Ks. And
west of the Mississippi.
Yeah, west of Mississippi.
I did a really cool thing there in White Castle. White Castle is just a few miles on the opposite side of the river from LSU, and the call letters were KEVL and K-Evil, which is, they're not good calls. So I applied for KLSU and got it and was granted those call
that was
letters.
big.
That's huge.
And I started playing rock and roll music and college music and stuff. And shit, man, we were killing them, man. And
See, I think that has a lot to do, honestly, your path has a lot to do with all the success because, you were aware and actually knew and loved all those different kinds of music. It's like you weren't a kid that got a cowboy hat and played acoustic and came to town 3 years later, and that's all you knew. I always thought that was an issue in most of music, that you had done R&B and grown up playing gospel music and playing old-timey gospel music and playing bluegrass and you knew rock and roll and you had done true country and all that stuff, that you had that full blend of all that stuff. It's I think had a lot to do with all the success.
Well, I guess that did have a lot to do with it, Russ.
Yeah. And the good thing about streaming today, I'll say, and you got kids and is that their playlists today, or even though it's not radio anymore, they'll have a real country song like Wade was talking about his son the other day. And the diversity of the stuff he listens to. That's one good thing about streaming, I can say.
Right, that opens it up so much. I think it's really representative too, Harold, you're talking about, because even back then, you were leading a team, and even before there was a team, you were the team. You did the music, the vocal, for jingles and all that. But as you hear you talk, every time that it progressed, you put together another good team. whenever it worked. It was, you always mention the other people. It's not like, well, and then I turned this around.
Yeah, well, you got to have other people.
Yeah, well, you always were good. And we talked about that, and one of the other things about, as a producer, you've just always been that guy that was very capable of putting the team together that you needed, and that's just evident in every one of the areas. But I guess when you've got that many brothers and sisters, you're used to working with a team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we always had a good team at the studio too. I don't think anybody ever had a better team than we had.
Oh man,
with Jim and Joe, and then some of the guys that we worked with, while they were not double scale guys, they still had that thing, whatever it is. I remember Bob Montgomery. Remember Bob?
Oh, yeah.
He worked for
I
him.
worked for Bob for years.
Yeah.
Yeah. He told me, he said, you can't make records with the people you hire. I said, well, bullshit, and and we did.
Yeah.
Well, I at that time I was using little Willie Ransford,
Right.
Wow.
Jack Eubanks, Leo Jackson, great steel player, Jim Baker, and Sudie and her sister, background singer, and the Cates sisters. They played violins. They didn't play fiddles. They played violins.
Yep.
They were so good.
It's funny. I don't want to interrupt you, but I got to do this before I forget. So you worked for Bob. Bob was one of the hardest guys I ever got to know. When I got to know him, I really liked him, but I'll never forget. And I got to take this minute to tell this one story. So I knew that rub with you and Bob. I knew that not from you so much, but Cotton and Scaife had told me that. And whenever I went to go play Bob Montgomery, until years later, it was always hard. He finally warmed up to me years later. So I'll never forget, Tim Menzie wrote for him.
Yeah.
And we had Tony Hazel, and they wrote Mama Knows together. And Blake Chansey, actually, if he got that song cut, we were both on it. But, I'd been down to Muscle Shoals, so I knew all those guys. And so we were all friends. So that song is the number one record. We're having the number one record party at BMI, and I'm standing next to Cotton and Scaife because Bob Montgomery was there, and you were there, obviously. Y'all owned the song. And Cotton said, there's something you don't see every day. And I turned around, you and Bob were hugging each other. And I'll never forget.
Well, I finally went to his house. I had dinner with him one night. He wanted me to come. And we got to be really good friends before it was over. And then a lady, if you remember, this black lady, that she was a friend of the guy downstairs that ran Glenn's Publishing.
Marty?
Marty Gamlin.
Just passed, yeah.
Yep.
And Dorothy Moore. She was friends with, and she did Misty Blue.
Right, with Bob Rowe.
Had an incredible hit.
I mean,
it was, and then Bob really got to loving us then, after all that.
Yeah. Hey, real quick.
But
I'm sorry, go ahead.
only thing, Bob, we had done it, and he had just divorced, and he was dating Kathy.
Yep.
Left Carol. And
Yep.
Kathy that worked the tree.
Yeah. And I went to his house. He lived in Brentwood.
Mm-hmm.
And God, I had to watch what was that movie?
Not Terms of Endearment.
No.
You told me this
but
story.
it's a crazy. It was. I can't think of the name of it now. I think we watched it 3 times that night.
The same movie.
And ate and what? Oh, what was it? It was the guys in prison, and they finally flip his mind.
Shawshank.
Shawshank Redemption.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Bob was really into that.
I actually like that movie. I didn't want to watch it 3 times, though.
But I get it, though, because if Bob
Russ,
was into it.
I was born at a good time.
Yep.
I don't.
But you made the most of it too. I mean, you made the most of it for sure.
No
and
doubt.
with absorbing all that music. So a lot of people lived then too and didn't do what you did. You know. Hey, real quickly, while we're talking about this and Bob Montgomery, so Chuck, you grew up pitching songs. I got a little thing here about that.
Okay.
And you played songs for everybody in town, which was not an easy job to go and playing songs.
No, it's not.
And so, but every producer or label person you played songs for would react differently. You had to kind of learn them.
Oh, yeah.
So for me, and maybe you can, I'm not going to say, but playing a song for Bob Montgomery, compare that to playing a song for Harold, because I can say it exactly. But what would Bob do?
Well, Bob usually had his cigar,
Yep.
and he the big hair and that beard and everything. I mean, he looked like a Greek god or some stuff. He had
Yeah.
that presence about him that was so big.
Yeah.
And let me take it to this level, okay? I used to do the same for him. At a point, Bob came up to me, and I was only, I think, 18, and I was a tape copy boy, and he came in there with a cigar. And, let me ask you something. You think you'd know effing hit if you heard it? And I was like, well, I know what I like. I don't know if it's a hit. I know what I like. That's what I go by, And he's like, well, you scream my stuff from now on. So it was that he was at that point like Harold was. There were so many things coming in, he couldn't cover it. And but then I'd have to have those. But just like when I'd go to Harold with him, and I had to like a song to be able to say, "Hey, Harold, I think this is a hit. What do you think?"
Okay, so you've got 10 songs you're going to play for Bob. Tell me what happens when you play them for him.
What?
How does he react as you play them for him? This is
Oh,
important.
he's through till. I mean, he puts the first song in, hits play, sits back in his chair, but kind of look his head up into the air, that little foot tap he had or whatever, and then all of a sudden, bam, just to the next one.
And what did he say when he took it out?
Right.
El Paso.
El Paso.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And was
Yes,
not kind
No.
about it.
No.
El Paso.
El Paso every time. He'd throw them
El
at
Paso.
you. El Paso.
What else you got?
Funny.
Exactly.
What else you got?
And it was always rough. Now
But-
you're playing a song. Okay, go ahead. Finish that because I want to talk about playing a song.
What
for
else
them.
you got?
But
Yeah.
and that now when we go up and play, Larry, it was usually Larry and I, we'd get what he had gotten that week and what I'd found that week, or if it was something that was just special, we'd fly across the thing there, over to Harold's and say, hey man, throw this in your car or whatever, blah blah blah. But when we'd sit down and listen to it, Harold, you were never like, Brian made the comment, not that you were a big hoop and holler guy, you're just like, can't remember like one comment, but it was you're like, yeah, and that was okay. He didn't like that one. What else we got? But there, it wasn't like, yeah.
And even if he loved it,
Yeah, it'd be like, okay, we'll send that. We'll put that on the list.
it'd
Put
be
that on the
number
list.
one record. So you had
Right.
to learn how to measure
But-
because, yeah,
But I think it's so important what we were talking about the other day that we were so fortunate because of Harold's success that we had the cream of the crop. I mean,
Yeah, you were getting the best stuff written.
and
pitched
people
to you.
wanted to tell their
That's
publisher
right.
the hell with it. I want to, like the Mike Reed story. That song never really got demoed because it got cut. And there was people would be rushing, and I'll be honest with you, when it because in my opinion there's songs that become great records, and then there's great songs that I don't care what kind of record you do to it, the song is still awesome. And I just remember that I got to a point where I liked a guitar vocal better than I did somebody's demo that they'd spent 3 weeks, bring Shane Keister in and do strings or, on a demo. Because then the difference when you track that song, okay, it kind of died because it didn't have the excitement of the demo,
Yeah,
to somebody
yeah.
who's not a producer, right? But
Yeah.
now if it was a guitar
That's-
vocal,
that's-
this
yeah.
thing just came to life.
Or the rough mix.
Yeah.
or the
Never
rough
could-
mix. Point
Never
blank.
could
Yeah,
get back to that point.
Yeah.
yeah. But I
But
always
you
thought,
knew where it was because you had it on that.
Exactly. It was there. Where'd it go?
yeah.
Where'd it go?
But I
Where'd it
always
go?
thought it was interesting because, in the 90s, especially the 80s and 90s, Nashville was starting to blow up big and everything was, as you say, so hypey. Everything's so hyped. It's so hyped. And so if I'd play a song for Harold and he'd go, yeah, that's really good, I'd tell the writer, what'd he say?
Yeah.
He said it's really good. What does that mean? Because other guys would go, and then nothing would happen. Bob Montgomery would throw something at you,
Yep.
And so with
El Paso,
Harold,
that's so funny.
yeah, but it was the whole. I want just because everybody remembered it, but the whole point was to me again is the understatedness. It's like even today, I remember, with Harold was the day he called me when Achy Breaky was blowing up, and he said, "What are you doing?" Well, anybody else would have been like, And he said, "Hey man," he said, I just want to tell you they're using the P word. He said it just like that. I said, the P word? He goes, phenomenon. Well, phenomenon, you don't say like that. You say phenomenon, And so it was never, that's the one thing, you never bullshitted anybody. It was always,
it was just straight ahead.
Yeah, and I always loved that because, and it was, but you were the hardest guy in the world to play a song for because at that point, he's right.
Couldn't read
You were hearing the best of the best. Everybody wanted to be on those acts. And it was never ever hyped. It was always, that's really good. That meant I really like that. And Don Von Trest did the best version of you ever when he said you called him that day. He said I think you got one here. He said at the time I didn't know that was equivalent to anybody else having a marching band walking down the street. So it was never, there was so much BS going on back then, and that's but you were the hardest guy to play a song for because it was if they didn't people come in and play you songs and they'd say that to me all the time. They didn't know for sure what was going on. They left because everybody else was going, that's great, man. And you didn't do that.
It's funny, go back to the House of Gold thing for a minute. What was crazy about Bob is, man, Bob loved writers. I mean, he was a writer. Misty Blue and, some of the things that he had done. But that stable of writers at one point in the early 80s, I mean, you had like Jim Hurt, Jim Dubois.
Jim Hurt was great, man.
Johnny Slate, Danny Morrison, Larry Keith,
Jeff
Silbar, Larry Henley, Kenny Odell. I mean, there's a writer behind closed doors,
You mentioned Scotty Turner, and I've told this story a couple times, and I don't think I told it here. But Scotty, when you first introduced me to him, you were working at Mercury Records. And you asked me if Scotty could come over and play me. You said he was going to call me and come play me some songs.
Yeah.
And we all get this point in my life. This was a big point I've remembered my whole life and never forgot this. I think I'd already had Achy Breaky and a bunch of those hits, and I thought, boy, look at me. Look at me. Hey, look at me, everybody. Look at me.
Yeah.
And you asked me, could Scotty come by? And I said, sure. So Scotty comes in to see me, and, he was an older guy I looked like, and I didn't know who he was. I didn't know anything about him. Now this is something my mistake. Like were. Anyway, he comes in, and Harry Nilsson had just died, who was one of my biggest heroes. And I'd gotten the box set that morning. Went down before I came into the office and bought. It had just come out the box set. I'd owned all the records separately, but I got the box set on CD because that was still pretty new at the time. And it was sitting on my desk. So Scotty comes in and sits down. He's going to play me some songs. And before he even starts, I'd never met him before. I didn't know any of your history. I didn't know any of that stuff. So he comes in and he sits down and he says, and we have a cup of coffee. And he says, you like Harry Nilsson? And I said, yeah, are you kidding, man? Him and the Beatles. He was one of my favorite singers of all time. And said, I owned all these albums, but I had to have the box set. He said, I signed Scotty Turner. And I'm going, this guy's obviously delusional, some Nashville guy.
You mean he signed Nilsson?
Yeah, he said he had signed Harry Nilsson. And I'm going, this guy's, And immediately I'm thinking this like an idiot. He goes, yeah. I said, well, I'll tell you a story. He said, I was in New York running the Brill Building. I'm going, running the Brill Building. Yeah, And he said, yeah. And he said, Scotty came to town. He said, moved from Minnesota. And he said, I heard him sing, and he was working at a bank. And he said, I'll put you on every demo you want to sing. He said, I'll pay you $5 a song. This was in the early 60s to sing all these demos over here. And I'd never heard this story. The beginning of Harry Nilsson for me was the Beatles in 67, know. And, so anyway, he's telling this story. And he said, he said, I had him sing probably 30 of my songs, paid him $5 a song. He said, well, years later when he blew up, he said, I decided I was going to do a compilation of my records, of my demos of him singing them. He said, so I figured I needed to call him and pay him scale, because there was demos. He said, so I got him on the phone and said, Scotty, I want to put out, Harry, I want to put out all these records you sang for me, these demos. He said, I want to pay you the right price. He said, Harry said, no way, man. He said, you already paid me $5. We're good. And he laughed and we laughed. I'm going,
This guy's full of shit.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, so we meet and talk, and he plays me some songs, and they were good. They were good little records and stuff, and one of the songs was kind of cool, so he left. But I'm thinking, man, this guy, So lunch came, and I decided I was going to get my box set out, so I walked across the street to Virginia's Market like we all did and got a sandwich, came back. I opened the CD up, and I pulled the little packet out, the little book, and I opened it up, and it says, I moved from Minnesota to New York in 1961 or whatever the year was. And he said, by good fortune, the first man I met in the music business was Scotty Turner. And he tells the exact same story. And I'm going, you stupid idiot. Who do you think you are? This guy was pretty much directly responsible because Harry said in that booklet, said if he hadn't met Scotty, he probably wouldn't have stayed.
Yeah.
And here's a guy sitting there coming in to see me and playing me a song like I think I know something.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, I found out later all the stuff he had done with Audie Murphy and all the big records he had produced
wrote
and
one
played
of the biggest
on.
songs ever.
Yeah.
Well, the business has
Shutters and boards.
Yeah, the business had a way back then of putting you in your place.
Yeah.
Kind of, like you say.
I never got to meet Audie Murphy.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. That would have been really cool.
Yeah, it would have, man. It was.
But Scotty, he made some good country records. Del Reeves, Girl on the Billboard.
Right.
I didn't know that. See, at the time, I know it now, but I didn't know it back then.
And Bobby Lewis, remember little Bobby played the
Lewis.
lute.
Yep.
Oh God,
Yep.
man! I think Bob.
Yeah, guitar was still bigger than he was.
Yeah.
Bobby was a little guy.
That's funny.
And the other guy, tie a yellow ribbon.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Before Dion.
Yeah,
and,
you told
Tony
me.
Orlando.
Tony Orlando. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
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 What was that guy's name? And he had a guy named Bill Phillips.
Yeah, I remember Bill Phillips.
We can make it.
I remember those
Hold
records.
on tight. Boy, Scotty wrote that song.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
It was a big record. And I'll tell you one of his darkest secrets. I love Scotty. Well, he brought me to town, really,
Yep, right.
And we were listening to some stuff one night, and I said, that We Can Make It, Bill Phillips is a hit. He says, you think so? I said, yeah. He says, I wrote that,
Oh, yeah.
I said, really? Get this. I said, how did you do that? He said, don't tell nobody. I said, I won't. Tell me. He said, I took a Beatles song and I redid it a little bit. And it said, if you listen to it now in a different light, the melody is yesterday. And if you go back and listen to this song, you can see how he did what he did.
Wow.
It's pretty crazy.
I'm going to listen to that.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because yesterday's pretty complicated, a lot of movement, But Scotty was a great player, so.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
I gotta go
that's a
listen
cool
to it
story.
now.
Yeah.
Listen to it and then listen to We Can Make It.
Wow.
Hold on tight, I know we can make it.
Wow.
And it's got one of the greatest steel guitar rides in it. Oh my goodness.
I have to go back and listen to that.
Yeah.
Harold, you it's kind of like asking you to pick a favorite kid or whatever, but is there one record that you've produced, that song or record, either one, that you would look at as like your favorite, like that record?
Yeah. That's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. 80s ladies.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
No, because that makes sense.
Is that not it, Ross?
That's a good one, man.
You're not going to beat that, like we were.
No, it
telling
ain't going to get no better than that.
No.
Well, it was Song of the Year, Record of the Year, Album of the Year, Female Artist of the Year.
Right. by a woman that was almost 50 in the 80s.
Came
She
out of-
was 49 years old then.
Came out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. She was doing hemorrhoid commercials in
Yeah.
New York.
Well, you know
Didn't
what's
it win
funny?
a couple Grammys too? Did it win
Oh, yeah.
some
Yep.
Grammys?
Yep.
Yep.
I remember
Yeah.
she'd bring.
Nominated for a bunch. Did she win one or
Yeah,
two? I
she
can't
was-
remember.
She was doing, when I met her, she was, one time I called her and I asked her, what are you doing? She said, I'm doing a hemorrhoid commercial.
She was so
Oh,
funny.
I love commercials.
She because I was still there when first started doing sides on her, okay? And Vinny, her dog, remember? She
Yeah,
had her dog
yeah,
with her all the time.
yeah.
Well, they had the posters, okay, out, and and I never really gurmed anybody, but I loved her stuff so much that I
Yeah.
said, KT, would you autograph this for me, right? And so she looked at me and she said, okay, and then she said, well, where can I write it? She goes, well, how did it go? I said, well, you can put it on the floor. And she goes, yeah, I always heard you were best on the floor. and so she put on there to Chuck, who's best on the floor, KT and Benny. And I had that thing framed still at my house. But she was just such a unique and cool lady.
Yeah.
So the drummer, if you remember, we don't have to say his name,
Right.
but I had just come up when those records were getting ready to come out. And so this drummer, I'd worked a lot with in Muscle Shoals, obviously, because I'd come up from there. We were good friends. And he called me and said, man, you got to get me an audition for that KT Osmond thing. And I barely knew KT at the time. Right. And, I'd only been working with you for a short time. But I ended up talking to, who was her manager? You got me to talk to the manager. Who managed her? I can't remember his name now.
Stan Morrell.
Stan Morrell.
Stan.
So I got him an audition. Well, he got the gig, right? So shortly thereafter, he'd been with this same girl who was also a singer from Mississippi.
Yeah.
Forever.
Beautiful.
Yes. I'm not calling names. So anyway, so they get together. Well, all of a sudden, the girlfriend finds out about it and shares, because KT was on Fire Time, big public figure, shares all this stuff with all the rag mags. So this big feature comes out on one of those magazines.
I remember that.
Front cover. He used to call her the fat lady or something. Now he's sleeping with her and yada, yada, yada. So right the week that came out, if it was Inquirer, let's say it came out on Wednesday, I had a demo session at 8:05, our demo studio on Saturday. I always use the same players. Well, most of the time. Well, this time, this drummer played on a lot of them, was coming. So my good friend, called this name John Willis, who's always been my leader
John.
since Muscle
Oh,
Shoals days,
he's
was the
great.
leader. So John shows up early because he's the leader with all the charts. And on every chair for every player in the drum throne that's set up in 8:05, he lays a copy of that magazine down. Yeah, it was and of course the drummer we're talking about was like just weird. His whole life was falling apart down there, and
Yeah.
it told stories about her getting a big check, and it's because it's public, I can say it. Her getting a big check, and her going out, and them having this big dinner in the hot tub at her house, naked, and all this stuff. And it's all in this article.
Yeah.
So anyway, all the guys come in and read it. It was the best demo session I ever did in my life ever. It was funny.
Who was the first guitar player?
Dino.
Dino Zimmerman.
Dean Zimmer.
I knew Dino when I was doing the stuff for the Louisiana Hayride. He was a session player on the Hayride. Dino was.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good guitar player.
Great guitar player.
Yeah.
Remember old Kenny Mims?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was way ahead of his. I mean,
Yeah.
Bob used
Kenny
him a
was
ton.
good.
Kenny was.
He was different.
He was
was real
crazy, and he was a
different.
little
Yeah.
bit different, man. But boy, some of the stuff he would come up, with just, change a record like that, And Bob wasn't really like that progressive guy, Montgomery, as far as, I mean, he was true country. The things that he did, were more of the, he did some Eddie Arnold records and some of that stuff, but most of it was at, gosh, I don't know why I just thought this, but Razzie Bailey.
Oh,
You
yeah.
remember Razzie Bailey?
Yeah.
Midnight Holler.
Okay, here's a funny story.
He had a bunch of hits.
He did have a bunch of hits. He's actually, here's a trivia question that hardly anybody will be able to answer. Okay, do you remember all of a sudden Billboard came up with the Super Bullet? Instead of being, number one with a bullet, there was a Super Bullet.
Super
right?
Bullet. Wow.
And the first song that was ever number one with a Super Bullet was Razzie Bailey, "Loving Up a Storm."
Oh yeah,
Really?
That was the first.
didn't know that.
So anyways, so I'm working for Bob. Bob, I'm partying, having fun. Bob decides, hey, it's good. Let's put him out. So he said, Razzie was just starting up. He said, Razzie, can he run your concessions? So he put me on the road, making pretty good money. I didn't care. I was a just kid partying, having fun, right? Enjoying music. So we go out, we're on the road, and it's the first week and the first couple of gigs. I'm out there and, I know because I've been in the studio, so I know the lyrics. I know every song on it, and I'm over there kind of dancing and smiling or whatever. And about 4 or 5 days into it, Razzie calls me back to his, thing in the bus and says, hey, man, we're gonna move our concessions away from the stage. And I go, well, okay, well, any particular, did I do something wrong? And he said, no, I'm just sick of the women looking at you instead of me.
Wow.
And I looked at him and he goes, no offense, Chucky, because I was mainly Chucky back then. And he's like, no offense, Chucky, I'm just telling you the truth. You're a 19-year-old kid. I'm a 40-year-old man. We're gonna put the concessions in the back.
Funny.
But that's a trivia question that if you ever
He should have turned all that into a positive.
huh?
He would have sold some records.
Yeah,
if he
no
turned all that into-
That-
at the same time, Razzie was they had another guy who had some chart hits,
Right.
and he never sold any records either. What was his name? Little guy. Leon Everett.
Leon Everett.
Hurricane.
Leon Everett. Boy,
He was cool.
No, he didn't do
though.
Hurricane, did he? I'm wrong.
no,
Did,
no.
what was it?
I don't remember.
Gosh.
I couldn't tell you one of his hits.
Right.
Well, that's probably the problem. Yeah. That's-
Yeah, see, that's
Yeah.
the deal.
Yeah.
We
that's
can't
the
think of
thing.
one, yeah.
But then
Galante signed him. Yeah.
one of the first records that I was ever involved with Bob, because I'm screening material for him, and I found a song in the mail called "Love's Been a Little Bit Hard on Me."
Yeah.
Juice Newton, and that was Gary Burr.
Yep.
It was Gary was at the mailing in point then, and I found that and I took it to Bob and I said, "Man, this thing's catchy. This thing's cool as can be," and. Bob got it placed, boom, boom. And that's what really got me to where, okay, you're screening my stuff now.
That's cool.
That
was a big record.
Yeah. Oh, that was a huge pop record at that point.
Well, it's
it was like
important to know
81.
that nobody
Rex
listens to-
Benson all
yeah.
over again.
Yeah.
they didn't listen to mail-ins back then. They definitely don't do it now. That's it's hard to do, but
They mailed it in, and then
Yeah, it was in a package. Bob actually had this thing beside his desk, and it was like an old wine thing or whatever, but it looked like a mini coffin almost, and it was just stuffed with cassettes all the time because he would take stuff off the street as well.
Sure.
And and just going through tapes, and back then I was so young and green to the business that I didn't know anybody, so I couldn't, if some writer's name on it didn't mean anything to me. It wasn't like, oh, this is going to be good because so-and-so wrote it. I just listened to songs.
Sure.
And when I got uninterested, I used to tell people the way I always did it was, like you're driving down the road in the car and a song comes on. There's that period that you're listening and where you lose interest, you hit the button. And that's how I always kind of tried to treat listening to a song was, how long would I listen to that before on the radio before I'd hit the button? Yeah. Or did I say, then what happened? And that was one of the things for me that it was always like where you turn and you hear that one line that gets your attention and then you're like, and then what happened?
Yeah.
And then they'd produce the next thing. Okay, well then what happened? And then they get to the chorus and they tie it and you're like, man. This,
Yeah,
that,
you just made me think of a memory of listening to mail-ins because, as you know, at the music mail, we listen to everything.
oh yeah,
We did.
Yep.
everything.
And remember those mail pouches? Those
Part
mail
of-
boxes?
That
full
was
stuff?
part of our success.
Yeah.
We listened to
Open door.
everything.
Yeah. And people would laugh. Most people in town would laugh and joke about coming in and listening to mail-ins. But Lisa Ramsey and I, and Latricia Allen later on, they both were great too.
Tricia Allen.
we'd get the mail-ins, and we had been to a songwriters thing in Louisville one year. Because I'm from there, I used to go do their songwriter thing. They'd always give everybody the little small little Hillrich and Brasby bats. Remember those?
Yeah.
And say it's a hit on it or something. So we all had those, and we got to the point we'd take the mail-ins, and I'd put it in and play it. And if we didn't like it, I'd throw it, and they'd hit it and make it a hit. We said then we'd be done. There'd be stuff scattered all over. Well, that word got out to everybody that we were doing that. But in our defense, I came in one Saturday going through the mail and pulled out a song called "What Kind of Fool Do You Think I Am?" And it was #1 record on Leroy Parnell. So we signed those guys from Michigan and had a bunch of cuts with them. But every now and then you can find one. Al Carmichael and Gary Griffin.
Carmichael and Griffin. That's right. Yeah, man. They were good.
Was that the biggest hit you found in the mail?
Yeah,
and that was yours.
That's the biggest.
His was bigger than mine. His was a big pop record. Yeah, but that was a good one. And I'll never forget Carmichael and Griffin. So this is funny. So they had that record was a #1 record, and they're up in Michigan. They're regular guys playing gigs and working regular jobs. And so anyway, we decided to have a boat day on Harold's boat, and everybody's going to go down the boat. And so they came down for that, and they're in the big city. They're not used to this stuff. So anyway, we go out on the boat, and remember who all was on the boat? Shania was on the boat in a bathing suit.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. Shelley Wright.
Shelley Wright was on the boat, but all the riders.
She looked good in the bathing suit.
Yeah, and I was in my bathing suit. No, never mind. Anyway, so we're all on the boat, and man, they're like,
you're getting a lot of good stuff now.
Yeah, but I mean, we're like, that Gary and Al are like, because we were in the music business, they wanted to be in there, and they just had a #1 record. Like, wow, look at us.
Yeah,
look at us. They're on the boat. So anyway. I don't normally, how much I drink. I'm not a big drinker. You've known me forever. So anyway, when we came in, after we'd been out in the water all day, and it was a blast and everything, I did something I'd never done before. And you know how Harold can drink tequila.
Right.
I started shooting tequila with him.
It was really kind of crazy because for the most part, you were just looking for hits. And I might go through 100 songs in a day. Of course, you're not listening to the whole song or whatever, but man, when the Christmas album, the Alabama Christmas album.
Yeah.
The amount of shit that we had to screen through because it was the first all original Christmas.
Everybody.
Yeah, that was record. The whole deal. We're not going to do anything anybody's done.
And it was a whole, and so you had everybody from, Larry Henley, or top shelf writers like that to the grandma in Indiana sending you Tippy Tapper and Toto, the three elves, and it's July. And you're listening to 100 freaking Christmas songs a day. Yep. Dude, that was tough. We went through literally probably, I'd say at least 5,000 Christmas songs. No telling. I would easily 5,000 original.
What an album that is!
No, that was already done.
Yeah,
That's one of the best albums
we ever made.
It was great.
Put that out as a single.
By the way, that's my first gold record. I was still down in Muscle Shoals. It was platinum actually. Actually, it became double platinum. I think in the end, didn't it? But we got a platinum record, and Stan Muncy had written that song with a couple of guys down there who ended up writing for us, and it was the biggest deal because we were starving to death. I bought 2 gold platinum records and gave him one. I mean, we both cried like babies. I'll never forget that.
Right.
That was a big deal. That record was a big deal.
It was, and there were so many stories involved in the making of that album and afterwards. Because remember, Thistlehair the Christmas Bear was going to be the next huge animated series. The whole, and I remember that there became a time where certain writers got smart about. Harold was so busy that he couldn't always just see them. But like I said before, Harold gave me the pleasure of saying, we'll play it for Chuck, and if he likes it, he'll play it for me. And man, Ronnie Rogers took advantage of that because he ended up with 2 cuts on that album. He'd had cuts with the guys before, but yeah, man, that was a long summer listening to Christmas songs all day long, and
Yeah.
And,
how did you meet Harold for the first time?
Harold and I didn't really know each other. Obviously, everybody knew of you, but I okay, what ended up being 805, okay, used to be
Our demo studio across the street.
The demo studio used to be Wild Track. Steve Singleton and
That's right.
Dane Bryant owned it, all right? And it was, there was a parking lot in the middle, and then Mel's was next to it back then. And I was working for Steve. I was making tape copies, pitching songs, doing whatever. And I sat in that office and watched the music mill be built, okay, there on the corner. So I kind of knew Larry, because Larry and Bucky were over there a lot, you know, because they demoed over there and did stuff like that. But that Christmas album, I'm sorry.
You were watching them build the music mill.
Yeah.
Oh,
How'd you go to work the mill?
Build the music mill. And so, and once the mill was built, you know, or whatever, I was there, and it was always a dream. I'm like, man, it'd be so cool to work over there, you know, because I'd pitch some stuff over there. Harold had cut a few things that I'd done, but I didn't have that relationship where I could say, hey, Harold, can I come play your songs? We didn't really know each other that way. We'd see each other at parties. I'd been introduced, but my venue was through Larry Shell, which, you know, the Rev, when I love that guy to death.
The Rev.
He's such a classic. And
Yeah, man.
But so Larry, I went over to Larry and basically got hired through Larry. Didn't sit with Harold before. Harold, I think, told Larry, well, if you want to hire him, you know how like Harold is. You think it's good? Hire him.
Yeah.
Well, and we might cut this out, but it's all good. So I meet Harold, you know, when I got hired, and then I think it was the first or second day, there was a tracking session going on, and so we're in there, and Joe throws over a bag, and I rolled the perfect joint. I'd rolled the best joint I'd ever rolled. I mean, it looked like something out of High Times, and you grabbed it and you went, well, we've hired him for the wrong reason. And that was the day that we basically met. And then from there, you know, I just earned my way kind of in with Harold, because it used to be Larry would just take the songs. I'd find what I liked. I'd give it to Larry. Larry'd kind of think what he liked, and then take those to Harold. And then that kind of worked up to where it was like, well, Chuck, you gather what you want. Larry, you gather. And we'd come down there and play you stuff, you know, in your office. And those were great meetings, though, too, because man, we were hearing, and it was so weird because since we were hearing the cream of the crop, everything, just about 20% of what we heard would be on the radio within a year, even if we didn't cut it.
Yeah.
And
it'd still be there.
It'd still be there. Like you were saying, you know, 60 plus records that were number one that they didn't record. And but the amount of great songs that came through there, and you really hated it because you'd find the song that was just incredible, and it just didn't fit anybody. Mm-hmm. You know, it didn't fit anybody.
Well, Russ, and we sat down a lot together over the years, and Larry Shell, and Larry, and while y'all spent a lot of time and worked some there, it was not like you and Larry were there all the time every day. But if they wanted to play you a song, you knew it was going to be good, you know. Mm-hmm. So you're going to sit with them and listen to it. And it was like that with Russ and Larry.
And with Chuck, too. I mean, and you know, I tell you something interesting.
And with Chuck and, Donnie Lowry.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Donnie was...
And
what's Donnie? Is he still... Donnie's good.
Our really good buddy down in Louisiana. Tony Hazelton. You know, if it was Tony, it was going to be between 3 and 5 minutes of heaven, you know. It was going to be really... Yeah. And that's the way it was, you know.
Yeah, man. You know, you think about all that talent, you know, but as I want to say a minute ago, when we talked about you and Larry and me and stuff, Larry and I had this conversation just recently. And by the way, I'm going to go down and get him and bring him up here for one of these. But Larry, he and I had this
Yeah, I
conversation
think
recently.
we'll better do that sooner
know.
rather than later.
I
He's
know.
not doing well either.
I know, but when we talked about this a couple weeks ago, and we got into a conversation about it, and he said, if you'll come get me, I'll go. But anyway,
good,
the
man.
interesting thing about that is, to me, is that Larry had, just like we all do, has a little different taste than me, just like you do. And it was always cool because I worked directly with Larry there for a while. He'd find stuff that I would have never probably thought that I'd go, oh my God. You know, we had, but it's just not the one I would have picked.
Right.
And that was cool because when we go play songs, somehow I'd have a different appreciation when we left his office.
Well,
but you know, it was interesting that we heard stuff that way.
Well, it became an art too because Harold, you were so good at hearing what, you know, like for an act, if a song would fit, it didn't have to necessarily be demoed right or whatever, but if the song was there, you know, you made it where we, you know, wouldn't be like, well, I'm not going to play that for him. It's a female where it's a male act. Yeah. But if you listen to it from just a pure song standpoint, it's like, and all of a sudden Harold said, man, that might work. You know, just and if Harold said that might work, that was cartwheel, you know.
Get ready for the war ceremony.
But you know what I'm saying? But it allowed us to venture even further, open what we were looking for, as opposed to I want to up tempo, you know, blah blah blah. Right. And then like you were more on the studio side of it. You know what I'm saying? Because you're a lot like me. You're not a big picker or singer, you know. And then Larry was that picker, really singer, and he was incredible picker,
good player, Larry,
and vocalist too. At one point, he had did a lot of little stuff like that, but. It expanded all of our horizons.
Sure. It absolutely did. And, you know, I want to go back and touch on, I was going to say a minute ago, we talked about all the surrounding talent, and we also talked about a friend who had a friend, you know. So anyway, consider this for a second. So I'm over at 805 doing demos. So I love to be in the studio. So I did the demos over there. We did all our own demos there. Consider my session band, who I found by chance, by the way, when I was down in Muscle Shoals. When I first had my little studio down in Muscle Shoals, my little demo studio, when I was working for Muscle Shoals Sound, I just started, and one day these two guys walk in, a drummer and a bass player, and they said their names, and they said, we're playing this bar down in Haleyville, Alabama, and we want to start trying to make records, learn how to make records. We'll come in, if you do demos, we'll come in and play for free because we want to learn how to make records. It was Milton Sledge and Mike Chapman, who are members of the second most recorded band in history, is my understanding, next to the Beatles, the guys that played on all the Garth records, the G-Men. That was my demo band. And then also I met John Willis down in Muscle Shoals. He became my session leader. Those three on a
demo was the greatest thing in the world.
Those guys have played on more records than you can imagine. So they're overdoing my demo. So it got to the point that Garth started blowing up. And so Mike and Milton quit playing demos, because they're just playing so many masters now.
Right.
They said, well, keep playing your demos, though, because we all started together. And I said, great. So they said, but, you know, we don't, and I did demos on Saturday because I didn't want to miss anything during the week, pitching songs or anything. So I always did my demos on Saturday, which nobody liked.
Right.
But I did them on Saturday, so it wouldn't affect me being able to pitch songs and stuff and take care of business. Well, finally they called and said, man, we love you, but we're not going to work on Saturdays anymore either. So as luck would have it, John says, I know this drummer named Shannon Forrest, who's been was the biggest session drummer up from 2000. He was the number one drummer forever. He's out with people like Toto now. He plays on Tim McGraw and, you know, all that stuff too. An incredible drummer. He was my next demo drummer. You know, I mean, and so those guys were over in 805 working with world-class guys, cutting world-class songs. So when you always say, and you say this a lot, well, it wasn't anything I was doing, I can say that more than anybody. Right. These guys just walked into my life. I didn't go find them or anything. They just kind of showed up one day, you know. And so if you think that didn't make good demos, because people go, man, you make the best demos.
Dude.
Yeah,
well, I remember
it's not me.
That old 1614 where House of Gold was. There was the attic up there. And you remember,
great studio.
You remember in Ben Hall, who started, I think you
Ben Hall
did you bring him to town or?
No, but I met him when he had been here a while.
Right. But I mean, because that's how I first heard about Alabama, because he was working with you, but he was also doing the engineering up there in that attic and the House of Gold,
Yeah.
and but Chapman and those guys, Bob had those, a lot of those guys had them using them too. But old Ben, he was
he built my first studio.
Ben was something, man. When I was
it was a quadraphonic studio.
I always loved his thing about quadraphonic for people with 4 ears.
Yeah, I bought into it.
Yeah. Man, you'll appreciate this. Back to the Players Row again. So we were down in Muscle Shoals in my demo studio, and we were demoing a song one day. And, of course, I was a one-man show. I was engineering, and we're running the first song down we've got. And of course, the players are doing all the work on it, because I'm trying to get sounds and everything. And so all of a sudden I hear him hit the talkback and say, "Hey, put it in the red." And I said, "Wait a minute. I don't even know." We didn't have a singer. We just knew where the vocals were. We were just cutting the track because I didn't have a singer for it. But I knew the girl was going to sing it in one key. And put it in the red. I said, "Wait a minute. I don't even know what's going on." I said, "What are those 16 bars between the second verse or the first verse and the chorus? It's going to be great. Just hit it in the red. Hit it in the red." Okay, so I did. Yeah. Well, it's like 24 bars of a solo John Willis wrote for himself at that moment. And we laugh about that song. It never got cut. I know you heard it because Larry Shell, first thing he said when I played it for him, this is way back, goes, "Man, who's playing that guitar solo?" I said, "It's a guy named John Willis." And he hit me back and he called me. He said, "Hey, Harold wants to know who's playing that guitar solo." That guy John. I got him more sessions up here. Song never got cut, but there was a downside to having great players too.
What song was it? Do you remember?
Called "You Wrote the Book."
Okay, I see. I remember a little bit of that catalog.
Larry still talks about that demo.
You wrote the book.
It was okay. The song was good. It wasn't great.
Yeah.
But the guitar solo was great.
That's so funny, man. Back how we were, because we were just getting to know each other. I'm trying to figure out, how did you and I and Brian meet?
The most interesting thing I've ever had happen on a demo session. You'll appreciate this, Wade, but when I'm finally made a deal with KT and agreed. I told her, my deal was with her because I had a backup plan for all of her songs. I was going to cut them on Janie Fricky, and because I had been talking with Rick Blackburn and Roy Wanch. Wow. And they were looking for a different. Bob had made some records with her, and Billy Sherrill had made some records with her.
Jim Ed.
And one other really good producer. But I had done some commercials with her that sounded better than any records they ever did. You know what I'm saying?
She was a singer.
Yeah. I knew what she could do.
Done all those jingles, yeah.
Yeah. And so, anyway, but then when I heard all these songs that KT wrote, I thought, man, alive, this is a whole direction for Janie Fricky right here, So I went to her showcase, and she said, "Well, I want to keep them for myself," and I understand that, I said, "Okay." I said, "If you change your mind, call me." And so in about 2 weeks, she called me. And I said, well, come on down and let's sit down and have lunch and talk about it. She said, "Well, I'd like to, but I don't have enough money to get to Nashville right now." I said, "Well, when you want to come?" And she said, "Well, I can come any day." I said, "What about tomorrow?" And she said, "Yeah, I can come tomorrow." I said, "Well, you'll have a ticket at the what do you call it? The airport." And so I bought her a ticket, and she flew in, and she said, "Well, I've thought about what you told me and all of this." And I said, "Well, I'll make a little deal with you. We'll go in the studio and I'll get some really good players. And I did. And we'll do some demos. And if I think that they're good enough to pitch to a major record company, I will. But if there's no interest in you as an artist, I want to publish your songs, be your publisher, and make something happen. And so that's what she agreed to. And so I called Larry London and Larry London.
Bobby Briggs. David.
No, I called another guy first. Oh man, he played on the 80s Ladies.
Why don't I know who that is?
Oh, you do. Gary Prim.
Gary Prim.
I did know that.
Gary
Prim. Know that.
And I don't remember if it was John Willis or
Brignadello or...
I thought Dino played on that first record. Did he not?
No.
Okay. For some reason.
He might have overdubbed or something.
Mm-hmm.
I know you used Mike quite a bit. I didn't know if it was him, Brignadello.
Oh, man. Acoustic from, I think he's from, we just talking about him.
John
Willis.
Willis.
He played on I think the first demos.
Yeah.
And but anyway, so we're just, these guys are playing so good. Well, the songs are all good, you know, so that brings out the best in everyone, you know. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget that. When we got through with the first single that was released was called
Do you?
Staring through the pain, I can't see the rainbow for the rain. Wall of Tears. And I had an old album of Gus Hardin that I had with this song on it. I said, that's a hit for somebody. And so I played it for KT, and she made it her song, Wall of Tears. Yeah. It's the first cut on the album.
That's right. It was the only
It was the first single.
Gus Hardin. Wow. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I think it maybe got to 30.
I'd forgotten that.
And but anyway, so we did that and 80s Ladies, I'll Always Come Back, Younger Men, and one other song.
Wasn't Do You, was it?
No, Two Hearts Are Better Than
Two Hearts Are Better Than
One. And about the third song, the greatest drummer that's ever been through
Larry London.
Larry London. He came up and he said, Harold, you know we're not doing demos, don't you? And I said, well, I hope not.
Yeah.
But I don't know. What do you think? And he says, I want to do that Wall of Tears. I want us to do that one more time for me. And if you play it, when it starts fading out at the end, London does a thing on the drums that just, it's like you put it into overdrive. You know, it was so tasteful and so good what he did, and it played for another 30 minutes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was that good.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things you'll never forget, you know, in the studio.
I was going to say that, you know, I was going to ask you to go on, but you did it already, is that feeling when you're in recording something.
Yeah.
And it's magical. It never gets as good as that ever again. And I know when you're telling that story, that's right. Even when it's mixed and done, you never forget that first moment. And I've always said that I don't know. I can't tell you on the hit records we had how much the check was, the date it came. But I can tell you the first time either I heard the song or I heard it come back through speakers, one of the two. That moment is just, you can't describe that drug. You just can't.
No, it's for real, and it's just it'll be the only time it ever happens.
But, like I said, it is a drug almost.
Oh yeah,
because you search for it after that, but when it does come, it's like, wow.
It'll be just like that.
Yep.
You won't know it till it happens.
That's it.
Yep. Absolutely.
There's moments like that like just being a plugger, that you remember, like, okay, when Jeff and Larry wrote Wind Beneath My Wings, okay? I mean, there's a song, the first time you hear it, you're like, oh, I mean, that's a song, right? Mm-hmm. And well, remember, everybody cut that song. I mean, like 30 people. Lou Rawls was the first one to put it out.
He cut it at the studio.
Right. And that night, I pulled Larry Henley off of Ron Halfkin because he heard the recording of it, and Larry went after him outside of close quarters. So Brian owed his life to me because I kept Larry from killing him. But one of the things that sticks in my mind, just the one that, like, the coolest thing was they called, and I was bar hopping or whatever, and somebody said, Bob's looking for you, and that usually meant he needed a tape or something, and went back to the studio or whatever, and he says, Dolly Parton's down at the sound shop, and she wants a copy of this. She's going to cut it. And this song's only like 3 weeks old at that time. And I'll never forget, I went down there, and Ernie Winfrey, remember, he was the engineer down there.
Yeah, Ernie.
He was doing Dolly, and so I hit the buzzer to go in. He buzzed me in or whatever, and I go into the control room. There sits Dolly and him, and and she was just like, I've heard about this song, and I just can't wait. And I don't even really remember much of it after that, because I was in such like awe, sitting there with Dolly, and you're like, when you meet Dolly, you're like, well, hell, she is this real.
Yeah,
she is this cool. And she was just as down to earth and kind to me. And she said, will you listen to it? And so we sat there. I got to sit there with her while she listened to it. Big tears in her eyes. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm definitely cut that. Well, it didn't come off to be the record that, I mean, and then, like, remember Gary Morris had a pretty big record.
He had a great record on it.
And then I also remember then I remember Bet wanted to cut it. And I'm trying to remember who was the producer on that record. Big LA producer.
Was it Bowen, wasn't it?
I don't think it was Bowen, but anyways, Larry, Larry was my Larry imitation. What do you want? He was just short and to the point, and they played him the Bet recording, and they had added all that fly, and all that, and they picked him up in a limo, played it for him. It's Johnny Wright from Warner Brothers, and and Larry said, "Well, I'm not really sure how I feel about that."
Johnny Wright,
feel about that. How you did?
Is he still around?
I'm not sure. He was forever.
I love those Johnny.
I did too, but they said the producer looked over him and said, "You'll get over it when the Grammy comes." And sure enough,
it did.
And you talk about that was just one of those songs that went crazy. And it'd been a while since, because that used to be the deal, Harold, right? There was a hit song, everybody would cut it and put it on their album.
That's right.
Because everybody wanted their artist with this new great song. And then that shit went away.
Yeah.
Nobody covered hardly anybody's stuff. But man, when that song hit, everybody cut it. Everybody cut it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there was a time that if it was a great song, there'd be 20 cuts of it,
Yeah. May the best cut win.
Yeah.
Speaking of
well,
cuts.
it was always good for an album,
Yep.
All right, Chuck.
All right.
Glad you came by today.
Yeah.
You want to have any words with Harold?
Harold, I just hope you know, man, I think back to how much fun I had when I worked for you at the mill.
Yeah.
And it special place in my life.
Way to go.
And
Well,
always will.
what you did was special also,
Amen.
and you belong there.
Well, it was incredible, Harold, because even after I wasn't working there anymore, I was still allowed to be part of that family.
Yeah.
I was still always allowed there. I could walk into the control room, do whatever I wanted to, or if I had a song, I'd lay it in your slot because you had your little slots there, at the mill. But it's always been a pleasure, and you've added so many things to my life. I mean, there's not a lot of stories that don't have you, either me working for you or an act you were working with or something. But it was an honor and a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Chuck. Likewise, and it was a great experience, and we did have a lot of fun, a lot of good times.
Yeah, we did, man.
And a lot of success.
Yeah,
So
I love you, brother.
You
I
can't
really love you.
get it any better than that.
Yeah, we had fun doing it. Hell,
And it was all the people that we had there. We had some incredible people
yeah.
over the years. It
But
seemed
thanks for
like
being here.
every time somebody was replaced, it moved up a step or a notch. It was just a great time to be there.
Yeah.
I'm glad
boy,
you
sure
were
was.
part of it.
I am too,
Amen.
sir. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank you because I wouldn't have been there if I didn't know you.
Yeah.
And
And if I didn't get fired, they wouldn't have hired you.
that's true. That's true.
That's right.
Oh my God.
But I did hire him back.
Yeah, he
He
did.
did.
Yeah, he did.
He did.
Yeah,
That's
I knew that much.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
But
much,
as a
but I
friend
knew
and a
that
mentor, I love you, Harold. You're a great man.
Likewise.
Yeah. All right, buddy.
It's great, buddy.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mutual admiration.
Oh yeah, heck yeah.
That does it for this episode of Behind the Shed. Thank you for joining us. Behind the Shed podcast was created by Wade Smith, produced by Russ Zavitson and Wade Smith, recorded at Ace Haggerty's podcast house in Nashville, Tennessee. Camera, audio, and video and editing by Zach Day and Jack Youngblood. Music written and composed by Russ Zavitson. Today's guests were Chuck Bedwell, Russ Zavitson, Wade Smith, and Harold Shedd. You can contact the show via email at behindtheshed@gmail.com or visit us on Facebook and Instagram at Behind the Shed. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform and also on our YouTube page. If you would like to support this podcast, please visit patreon.com/behindtheshed. Have a great day and go out and share some stories. Tune in next week as we go Behind the Shed. If you're in the market for a new or pre-owned vehicle, try Pop Chevrolet. Pop Chevrolet will get you the best price guaranteed. Visit popchevy.com. That's POPS Chevy.com. This episode is brought to you by Paintsville Tourism. Paintsville is located in eastern Kentucky in the heart of the US 23 Country Music Highway. Visit paintsvilletourism.com. That's paintsvilletourism.com. Come see why Paintsville is eastern Kentucky's city of note. This episode is brought to you by Wild Bill's Fireworks. At Wild Bill's, they will help you start and maintain a successful fireworks business. Whether you're starting a retail store, a seasonal tent, or a part-time venture, Wild Bill's is your one-stop wholesale fireworks supplier. Their team can help you pick inventory. They offer business training, ongoing support to make sure you stay profitable no matter the size of your business. Call or text for more information. Just ask for Bill at 606-367-5569. That's 606-367-5569. Or visit wildbillsfireworks.com and make sure you ask about their financing plan.